What's up guys, Rex here. So I'm back, med school started up again for my second semester, and it was an awesome first week. We covered basically all of the ways your brain inputs information. So we talked a lot about sensation, but also all of our special senses such as vision and hearing and how we taste food and how we smell. And so I've actually got two videos today because I couldn't even choose which was the more cool thing I learned about. So first video is going to be how to make your thumb disappear. So before we get to that, we have to talk a little bit about vision and how vision works. So first of all, we have two eyes. Hopefully that is no huge surprise to anyone. So we have two eyes, and each of those have their own optic nerve, which is cranial nerve 2. And so cranial nerve 2 comes, and it actually has this little thing called the optic chiasm in the brain, of where we have some of the nerve goes off to this side, some keeps going here, some goes off here, some goes off here, and these go to different parts of the brain that actually process this information. But that's not important for this video. So what is important is that we have this interesting division of, we can basically divide this eye in two, where part of the information stays on the same side, part of the information switches over. So if I color code this, we have part of our retina here, which we'll say is red, and that comes and it stays on the same side. Additionally, we have part of the retina here on your right eye, so I should probably label these. We'll say this is right eye, this is left eye, and it comes and it goes through the optic chiasm and goes to the left. And then similarly, we have another part of the eye, which is the right half of your retinas, and that comes in on the left side of your body, your right half of the retina, and so you can also call that your medial retina or your nasal retina, because we would have a nice little nose here, which will be the worst drawn nose in all of history. And additionally, we would keep the right half on the right side. So you may think this means, all right, so our right half of the brain processes all of our right field of view, and the left half of our brain processes the left field of view. However, this is actually the opposite of what's true. So if you imagine that we have some object sitting here, X marks the spot, on the right half of our field of view, these light rays actually have to go through the eye, and they are going to bounce through the eye and hit on the left half of our retinas. Similarly, if we have some object way over here on the left side, that's going to go through the eye and actually project onto the right half of our retina. So the right half of our retina is actually seeing our left side of the world, left field of view. So your brain is actually flip-flopped, which is kind of the pattern you see throughout your entire body, is that you have this contralateral representation of the world, that what you feel on your left hand is actually processed by your right side of your brain. Similarly, everything you're seeing on the left side is crossing over and being processed in the right half of your brain. So that's one thing we're starting with. What's really cool about the anatomy of the eye is if I scroll down here so I have a little more space. So if I draw a really big representation of the eye, and we say that that's like our lens and these are just ciliary muscles and all that kind of stuff, not important for this, but we draw an overly simplified retina and an overly simplified optic nerve. And so it's really interesting that you have all kinds of layers of cells that make up the retina all over here, and these are different like nerve cells, and you also have to have some blood supply, and there are a couple neuron bodies that are processing this information. But the interesting thing is the actual sensory cells, your rods and cones, and so your rods are really light sensitive, and they're sort of for black and white vision in low light environments, and your cones are what actually see color, and they take a little bit more light to operate them. And so in really low light environments, it's only your rods that are working, and so that's why the world looks black and white when it's dark. So those actually only lie at this very bottom layer. And so light actually has to pass through many layers of cells to get to where it's actually being sensed by our body, and that signal is being transduced. And so then the neural signal is going to travel back upwards, outwards, and then down this optic nerve. And so we actually have a really interesting part of our field of view called the fovea. And so you also will hear it called like the macula, and so that's where macular degeneration comes from, is this actual degeneration of this spot. And this has really interesting physiology of where it actually has by far the best acuity in our vision. It has a very high density of cones, And it also has this interesting anatomy where all of these cells sort of clear the way for this little tiny spot that all of the nerve signals that come from all these very densely packed cones sort of skate around and go very lateral before traveling up into the optic nerve. And so in this spot only, light sort of very directly doesn't get scrambled at all by going through several layers of cells. So now, if you're looking at this closely, you might see something that sort of is interesting. What do we do with that? This whole optic nerve area, that we have an optic nerve there. We don't have any space to have any sort of light receptors, whether they be rods or cones, to receive information there because there's a bunch of nerve tissue in the way. So if this is the right eye, I'm not sure if I mentioned that previously that I'm drawing, you should be able to predict that, okay, so this fovea, and so it's getting rays actually sort of from the very center, that I would sort of draw the division. This was not drawn super well. The division of this is your right field of view, and this is your left field of view. Over here, that rays of light would be coming like this and like this. And so this fovea actually sort of ends up being the center of our vision. And so we have a tiny little spot in the very center that's very small, actually, only about the size of like your thumb at arm's length, that has that high precision visual acuity that allows us to do cool things like read or something like that. And so that also then means this optic disc must be on our right side of our field of view for our right eye. But this is also the opposite if I go back to my first drawing, that I would actually, if I draw in a fovea, let's make just a fovea in green, that we would have sort of a fovea in this center spot here, that our right eye has an optic nerve causing a little bit of a blind spot somewhere maybe over here, and our left optic nerve is having a little bit of a blind spot somewhere over here. This is something you probably never knew about. And so this was interesting to me to think about, that our professor mentioned that there is a thing called a scotoma, which is a little tiny defect in the retina that people have that are causing a blind spot. And he mentioned how it's something that many people never notice until sort of only an unfortunate circumstance arises where it causes an accident of they like didn't see something coming. And you don't really notice it because our eyes and brains working together are so good at processing information that this blind spot is actually being also sort of redundantly seen, that if I saw this right blind spot, it's being redundantly projected onto our left eye's retina. And similarly, the blind spot being caused by this optic nerve that can't see here is being projected all the way onto the right side. And so it's actually filled in. But that doesn't mean you still can't see this blind spot that you probably never knew about. So the way to do that, this is like the coolest thing ever to me because it's actually like physiology in action. So we'll put the iPad down. All right, so we're gonna do this together. So you're gonna pick a spot just straight ahead of you and we're gonna stare at it. So for me, that's gonna be my camera lens. And then what I'm gonna do is close my left eye. It doesn't matter which, so I'm gonna close my left eye, stick my right thumb directly out so I'm covering over the spot, and then slowly start moving it to the right. And then all of a sudden, I'm going to find this spot where if I'm still staring straight ahead and I'm sort of just noticing my periphery, I'm not actually moving my eye to look at it. Right now, I cannot see my thumb. It's as if the wall is just continuing over my thumb and it doesn't exist. And then boom, I see it. My thumb is gone. It's there. It's gone. It's there. It's gone. And that is just so mind-boggling to me that I have had this blind spot all of my life, and I had no clue about it until I actually had to be told about it and learn about it, because my eyes are so good at processing information and making up for that deficit. But also because I think I've sort of underestimated how sort of center focused my vision always is, that I'm not focused on that periphery because my macula, my fovea, is only such a small little part of my vision that that's really what I'm always focusing on at any given time. Not as much that peripheral vision segment that has that little blind spot that appears every now and then. If I'm closing one of my eyes, I have a blind spot. I have no clue about it until I do something obvious. Move my thumb. Yep, there it is. My thumb is gone. So, coolest thing ever to me. That was my first week back. I'm in a great mood because it was a fun week of medical school. So, let me know in the comments down below if you're able to find your blind spot and see your thumb disappear, because that is real magic to me. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, leave them down below. I'll read and respond to every single comment. If you want to learn more really cool things, make sure you subscribe, hit the notification bell as I continue on my journey to becoming a doctor. As always, like the video if you like the video, dislike the video if you dislike the video, and until next time, don't be ordinary, go be great.